Mother Teresa of Calcutta is, without a doubt, one of the most venerated and admired figures of the 20th century. Before anything else, write this decree in the comments. I manifest a miracle of abundance in my life. I am worthy. I accept and receive with gratitude all the blessings the universe has for me. If you want more hidden revelations like this, subscribe and turn on the bell. Don't miss anything. Her face, marked by the years and her unwavering dedication to her cause, has become a universal symbol of compassion, devotion, and sacrifice. For decades, her name has been synonymous with kindness, limitless charity, and unconditional love for the less fortunate. Her canonization by the Church only reinforced the image of a saintly, pure, and untouchable woman. But what if behind that immaculate image, another story existed? A story that few dare to tell. A disturbing account that challenges everything we have believed for years. Was Mother Teresa truly an icon of mercy, or does her legacy conceal a much darker truth? Because Mother Teresa's devotion was not solely focused on helping the poor and the sick. She also had a vision of suffering that was, at the very least, unsettling. She didn't just see pain as an inevitable part of life. She believed it was a divine gift, a tool for purifying the soul. To her, suffering was not something to be avoided at all costs, but rather to be accepted with resignation, even with gratitude. This is where the difficult questions begin. To what extent did her perception of suffering influence the way she treated the sick? Did she cross the thin line between compassion and cruelty, disguised as virtue? To answer this, we must examine what really happened inside the hospices she founded around the world. Hospices that, in theory, were supposed to be sanctuaries of peace for the dying, but in practice became the backdrop for disturbing stories. Numerous testimonies from doctors, volunteers, and former members of her congregation have revealed shocking details about the conditions in which patients were treated. Lack of hygiene, shortages of basic supplies, and an almost ritualistic approach to human suffering. Because in those hospices, where the sick arrived seeking a final breath of dignity, they encountered a devastating reality. Old, worn-out beds, insufficient medical equipment, and open wounds left untreated with even the most basic care. And the most shocking of all, a systematic refusal to use painkillers, even in the most desperate cases. While the world believed these centers were sanctuaries of love and compassion, the reality was far more disturbing. Pain was not relieved, it was revered. Mother Teresa and her followers did not see modern medicine as a tool for salvation, but rather as an obstacle to their vision of suffering as redemption. Those who were dying were not comforted with palliative care. Instead, they were taught that their torment was a gift, a divine test that would bring them closer to God. But to what extent did this belief justify the neglect of human well-being? The premise was clear. If Christ suffered on the cross, his followers must also suffer. It did not matter that alternatives existed to alleviate their pain, because the true test of faith lay in enduring it until the very end. But the most unsettling part of all this is that while these people died in deplorable conditions, millions of dollars in donations were pouring into Mother Teresa's organization. Vast sums sent by businessmen, politicians, and devoted followers who, believing their money was helping the poor, never imagined that those funds were rarely used to improve the quality of life for the sick. The questions are inevitable. Where did all that money go? Why did conditions in the hospices never improve, despite the overwhelming amount of donations the congregation received? Was this truly a movement to help the needy, or was there something more behind its purpose? It has been documented that a portion of these funds ended up in Vatican accounts, rather than being used to alleviate the suffering of those who were supposedly Mother Teresa's top priority. Was this an unknown practice to her, or was she fully aware of how the resources were being handled? And if she was aware, then we face an even more chilling revelation. The possibility that her work was not just a refuge for the dying, but a mechanism of power, a structure that, under the guise of mercy, operated under rules the world never imagined. So the inevitable question is, was she really the saint that everyone believes? Or did her vision of faith lead her down a path where suffering became an end in itself? Because the most terrifying part of this story is not just what happened in the hospices, but what it reveals about the nature of power, faith, and manipulation. If one of the most venerated figures in history concealed such a disturbing reality, what else have we blindly believed without questioning? Perhaps it is time to look beyond the image of the untouchable saint. If you've made it this far, tell me in the comments what you think about this prophecy. I'll reply to the best comments. Perhaps it is time to face the truth no one wants to hear. And the truth, as always, is far darker than we are prepared to accept. Terminally ill patients were forced to endure pain without relief because it was believed that their suffering brought them closer to God. Painkillers were denied to them, even in the most agonizing moments of their suffering. The premise was clear. If Jesus had suffered on the cross, they must suffer too. And the most horrifying part was that this practice was not limited to a few isolated cases. It became a rule, a philosophy applied rigorously within the hospices. Documented cases reveal patients with fractured bones, severe infections, and terminal illnesses, begging for even the slightest relief, only to be given a sermon about the importance of accepting pain as a divine gift. Volunteers who questioned these practices were silenced or expelled. Meanwhile, those who obeyed without hesitation were seen as the true disciples of faith. But the most shocking fact is that while these people suffered in agony, millions of dollars in donations continued to pour into Mother Teresa's organization. Vast amounts of money, sent by the businessmen, politicians, and devoted believers, convinced they were contributing to a cause of pure goodness. Because while it was logical to think that it would be used to improve facilities and provide better care for the sick, reality showed otherwise. The hospices remained bleak and precarious. Medicines continued to be scarce, and the patient's quality of life did not improve. Testimonies from former volunteers revealed that in many of these places, conditions were even worse than in the poorest hospitals in the world. Beds were shared by multiple patients, surgical instruments were reused without sterilization, and a sense of resignation filled the air. No one truly expected to be cured, only to die, with pain as their final companion. And yet, the money kept flowing. It is estimated that Mother Teresa's organization received hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, not just from private donations, but also from governments and religious entities that saw her work as a cause worthy of support. It has been documented that part of these funds ended up in Vatican accounts rather than being used to alleviate the suffering of those who were supposedly Mother Teresa's priority. This is where an even more unsettling question arises. How is it possible that one of the world's largest charitable organizations operated with such opacity without anyone questioning its management? The answer is simple: the power of faith. When a religious figure reaches an almost divine status, their actions cease to be questioned. Any doubt about their methods is seen as an attack on faith itself. Mother Teresa was not just a nun, she was a symbol of goodness in its purest form. And when someone becomes a symbol, the truth takes a back seat. So, was she truly the saint the world believes her to be? Or was she a woman trapped in a distorted vision of faith, unknowingly perpetuating suffering in the name of God? But here's where the story takes an even more unsettling turn. Because in the last days of her life, when her own faith began to crack, Mother Teresa made a revelation that has remained hidden for years. A final message that was not directed to the Pope, nor to the leaders of her congregation, nor even to the thousands of faithful who worshipped her. It was directed to a man who, at that time, seemed to have no connection to her at all: Donald Trump. Why would someone like Mother Teresa, in the final moments of her life, feel the need to speak directly to Donald Trump? What did she see in him that the rest of the world could not imagine? Was it a warning, a prophecy, or perhaps a burden he was meant to carry? What you are about to discover could forever change the way you view her legacy, and could reveal something the Church never wanted you to know. The world will place you in a position of power, and when that moment comes, your decisions will not only shape your destiny, but that of millions. You can be a beacon of light or an agent of darkness. Your hands can bring hope or be stained with the blood of the innocent. Trump, bewildered, could barely react. At that time, he was merely a real estate magnate, a businessman used to handling money and properties, not dealing with the fate of entire nations. To him, those words seemed like a meaningless prophecy, an enigmatic message from a woman many considered a saint. But time, relentless as ever, proved that Mother Teresa's warning was no coincidence. Decades later, Trump rose to the White House, becoming one of the most controversial figures in political history. His presidency was marked by decisions that shook the world, from immigration policies that tore families apart to international conflicts that ignited unprecedented geopolitical tensions. Every executive order, every fiery speech, every moment of his administration seemed to align with the warning that the dying nun had given him. But the truly disturbing thing is not just the accuracy of her prediction, it's what it implies. Because if Mother Teresa foresaw Trump's impact on history before he even considered running for office, what else did she know? Was her message meant only for him? Or was she pointing to something much deeper, something we have yet to fully understand? Here is where the story takes an even darker twist. If we analyze Mother Teresa's trajectory, we find a chilling paradox. She was a woman who dedicated her life to serving the poorest of the poor, yet at the same time, her vision of suffering bordered on cruelty. She did not seek to eradicate pain but to glorify it. She saw suffering as a bridge to redemption, a tool for spiritual purification, and while her followers revered her for her supposed compassion, in the hospices she founded, medical treatments were denied, painkillers were rationed, and the terminally ill were left to agonize without relief. The question no one dares to ask is, who was Mother Teresa really? A saint devoted to the needy, or a woman consumed by a distorted vision of faith? And the most chilling question of all, if she was able to foresee Donald Trump's future, if her words were a warning about the impact of his decisions, what else did she uncover in the final moments of her life? Was her crisis of faith a result of having seen something the church never wanted the world to know? Perhaps her last revelation was not just a warning for one man, but for all of humanity. Because power, unchecked, corrupts. Faith, without compassion, destroys. And history has shown us time and time again that ignoring the warnings of the past only condemns us to repeat the same mistakes. Now that you know this story, now that you are aware of what the church has tried to hide, will you have the courage to question everything? The nun's words were not chosen at random. They were not simply advice for an up-and-coming businessman. They were a declaration of destiny, a message that transcends time and decades later has taken on a deeply disturbing significance. Because if history has taught us anything, it is that great events do not happen by chance. The pieces on the chessboard have always been in motion, and those who seem like mere pawns often turn out to be the key players in the most drastic changes in the world. So, what did those words truly mean? Because one thing is undeniable, Mother Teresa's message was not just about Trump. She was speaking of something more, something that most people still fail to understand. History has shown that power, when wielded by those unprepared for its weight, can become a devastating force. A single man can change the course of humanity, and Trump was no exception. His rise to the presidency was not just a political event, it was a phenomenon that shook the very foundations of the global order. But what if this had already been foretold? Because if Mother Teresa saw it coming, if she understood what was to come, then the real question is, what else did she know? Was her message merely a warning? Or was it a desperate attempt to prevent something far greater? This is where the story takes an even more unsettling turn. Because if we analyze Mother Teresa's path, we find a disturbing pattern. A woman who devoted her life to serving the poor, yet whose relationship with pain and suffering was unusual. She did not see suffering as something to be eradicated, but as a means of purification. While the world revered her for her compassion, in her hospices, medical treatments were denied, medications were restricted, and the sick were left to agonize without help. And what if that very vision led her to see something the world was not ready to understand? If she saw suffering as a means of redemption, what were the true implications of her message to Trump? Because what seems like simple advice might actually be a coded warning, a message that transcends religion and enters a much more complex realm, the fate of humanity itself. Mother Teresa knew something. Something that world leaders, the highest circles of power, and the elite have tried to keep hidden. But the real question is, how did she know? Some speculate that, in her final years, the nun had access to privileged information, documents, conversations, messages from religious and political leaders she had met. But there are those who believe the truth is even more unsettling. Mother Teresa didn't just know what was going to happen, she had been warned. And if she was warned, the next question is inevitable. By whom? Was it a divine message, a mystical revelation, or perhaps a warning from someone who understood the true workings of global power? Because if we look back at the most influential figures in history, we find a pattern, an invisible thread connecting leaders, saints, monarchs, and dictators, a hidden message passed down through generations, always at critical moments, always before great changes in the world. And this is where everything takes on an even more chilling meaning. What if Trump's rise wasn't a mere coincidence? What if his path to power was not determined by fate, but by forces operating in the shadows? If Mother Teresa understood this, if she tried to warn him, it means she knew that power is not just a political matter. It is a force that shapes the world, that can be used to create or to destroy. And if her message to Trump was a warning, what exactly was she trying to prevent? Because here lies the real question. If Mother Teresa, in all her wisdom and experience, grasped the magnitude of what was coming, if she realized that a single man, a single act of will, could tip the scales between light and darkness, what else did she uncover in those final moments of deep reflection? What secrets did she keep in her heart that she may never have had the courage to reveal? What did she see in the final days of her life, in her last moments of contemplation, that made her question everything she had believed and defended so fervently for years? Because there is something no one has dared to say out loud, something so profound and disturbing that not even the Church itself has been able to admit it, something that lies beyond the limits of faith and reason. Perhaps her crisis of faith was not simply the result of years of personal sacrifice, of dedication to the most needy, of endless days serving the poor and the sick. Perhaps it was not a passing doubt or a manifestation of exhaustion, but something far darker and more complex. Perhaps it was the result of witnessing something so terrifying that, in trying to understand it, her faith crumbled. Something that, deep inside, she knew the world, in its ignorance and apathy, was not ready to face. Could it be that Mother Teresa's final warning, the words she spoke before her death, was not just a sign, but a last desperate attempt to prepare humanity for what was coming? An effort to guide us toward the truth, even if that truth was too bitter to accept. Because power without control corrupts irreversibly. Faith without compassion destroys everything it touches. And history has shown, time and time again, that ignoring the warnings of the past only condemns us to repeat the same mistakes, to fall into the same abysses without learning from our failures. Now that you know this story, now that you hold a crucial piece of the truth in your hands, will you dare to look beyond appearances, to question everything, to challenge your own beliefs? Will you have the courage to step into the unknown, to explore the darkest corners of reality, even if it leads you to an uncertain fate? Because in the end, the only way to reach the light is by facing the darkness within ourselves. Now that you know this, I'll leave you with this video where we reveal another shocking secret. Click here before it's too late.